when some of his friends grab him. They're giving him a hard time because, ever since the expedition to Ida village, people have been calling Kai a hero for rescuing Jose. On top of that, there are even rumors going around that Kai and Jose grew really close during their time out there. Some of the girls notice what's happening and assume the boys are just fooling around like usual, but Elsa can't seem to look away from Kai. The others pick up on this and figure she must actually have feelings for him. They start teasing her, joking that if she doesn't make a move soon, someone else might swoop in and take Kai for herself. A few minutes later, Jose walks up to Kai and asks if they can speak alone. Even though he has no clue what she wants, Kai agrees, and the two of them head into a nearby alley to talk. To start, Jose makes sure to properly thank Kai for rescuing her life during the incident, but she also brings up something else. She could have sworn she spotted a divine crest on Kai's face when he was battling those monkeys. Now, after studying him up close, she's sure it must have been her imagination. After all, what are the odds that Kai just happened to become a guardian bearer out of nowhere? Her defeat in battle made her realize how weak she truly is. That's why she's decided to dedicate herself fully to training in order to become stronger, and she expects Kai to start joining her every morning from now on. Kai isn't thrilled about being dragged into Jose's training routine, but he can't bring himself to turn her down, so he reluctantly agrees to train with her each morning. Meanwhile, Kai's friends have been secretly spying on him from behind a tree this entire time. They have no clue what he and Jose are discussing, but they're all incredibly jealous that Kai gets to spend time with her. Later on, Kai goes about his usual routine and begins splitting firewood when Elsa unexpectedly approaches, carrying a bowl of water. Kai glances up and asks if she brought it for him. Elsa nods, explaining she figured he might need a drink after working so hard under the sun. Kai thanks her for looking out for him. At that moment, one of Elsa's friends approaches and urges her to hurry, as they still have tasks to complete. Kai assumes she was simply being kind, but Manso sees through Elsa's intentions and remarks to Kai that he's a fortunate guy. Right then, Kai catches the sound of an unusual bird call in the distance, and it reminds him of the one from the valley, though he can't figure out why it's happening here. That same night, Kai attempts to fall asleep, but the persistent bird cry keeps reaching his ears. Eventually, he gives up, climbs out of bed, and makes up his mind to track it down. A massive wall surrounds the village, but with Kai's current strength, he effortlessly leaps over it in a single bound. He then sprints all the way back to the valley where everything began. When he arrives at the tree, he notices the stone once again. Now that he understands it's the gravestone of a god, he attempts to read it, but for some reason, he still can't. Even so, he expresses his gratitude to the god for saving him and spends the rest of the night carefully cleaning the stone. Before he leaves, he places a small offering in front of it, but on the way back, he starts to feel a bit hungry, so he drinks from the river and grabs some fruit from a nearby tree. He's surprised by how much food the forest provides, which makes him wish he could actually live out here, and then he had an idea. He could just build a house for himself right in this place. However, building a house means he'll need wood, so he scales a nearby cliff until he spots a tall, sturdy tree perfect for cutting down. But now that he's standing right in front of it, he realizes he has no idea how to actually chop it down. He does have his dagger, but that's far too small to handle a tree this thick. Thinking quickly, Kai decides to use his fire magic, increasing its intensity until it shapes into a blazing blade around his hand. Unfortunately, since the tree is made of wood, his fiery slash accidentally ignites the surrounding forest. Thankfully, he manages to extinguish the flames before they spread too far, but he still needs to figure out how to fell this tree. If he could summon fire from nothing, surely he could come up with a way to chop through wood. Just then, a memory from his past life surges through his mind, and suddenly, Kai recalls everything about molecular structures. He realizes that to cut down the tree, all he needs to do is disrupt the bonds between its molecules. Pressing his palm against the tree, he focuses, channeling his spiritual energy in a new way, shaping it into a force that could slice straight through the tree's very trunk. Yet, before he can perfect the technique, he hears a sound nearby, coming from the valley's direction. Curious, he chooses to investigate. Taking a closer look at the tree, we notice that Kai indeed succeeded in cutting part of the tree's molecules. Upon reaching the valley, Kai spots what appears to be a group of kids using some kind of climbing gear, preparing to descend into the valley. Uncertain of their motives, but knowing it's his responsibility to guard the valley, Kai leaps into action, fully ready to knock some sense into a few of them. To his shock, as he gets a better look, he realizes these aren't children at all. They're short people. Their leader moves forward and introduces himself as Porek, who is the chief of the Kora people. Kai has no knowledge of the Koras before this moment, and he finds it odd that their leader speaks the human language with such fluency. Porek goes on to explain that he and his people often trade goods with human merchants, and it seems humans hold their goods in high standard. Porek wishes to apologize for arriving here without asking for permission first. He clarifies that they've come to honor an ancient pact made with the great valley god who dwells in this place. Based on what they understand, the valley god takes the form of a human. Because of this, they are convinced that Kai must be the valley god. Porek goes on to explain that the Koras have quietly lived in these woods for generations while worshipping the land gods, but a few days ago, the pigs attacked them in an attempt to take their land god. The Koras are really weak, so they stood no chance of winning and were forced to flee their home. Porek speaks to Kai, calling him an ancient arbitration god, and pleads for his assistance in taking back their homeland. Kai struggles to make sense of everything, but before anything else, he needs to understand what an arbitration god even is. Porek elaborates that, according to the legends, an arbitration god is a being granted the power of all creation to safeguard the forest's creatures, yet Kai remains remains skeptical, finding it difficult to accept that the legend could possibly be referring to him. Just then one of the dwarfs speaks up and says he doesn't believe Kai is an arbitration god because the legends say an arbitration god should be a fierce warrior who punishes those who disturb the peace of their land, and Kai doesn't look fierce in the slightest. However, Porek says he is absolutely certain that Kai is the arbitration god because he can see it clear as day. Years ago, Porek once incurred the wrath of the valley god by entering this valley without permission, and as punishment, the valley god took both of his eyes. However, in return, Porek was granted the power to perceive the spiritual energy surrounding him, and when he observes Kai, he can clearly see the essence of the valley god coursing within him. He insists is undeniable proof that Kai has been blessed by the valley god's protection. Not only that, they've already presented a sacrifice, so now Kai has no choice but to help them. Kai gets confused by the mention of a sacrifice, so Porek explains that earlier today he sacrificed his granddaughter Arua to the valley. Kai panics and asks them to show him where they left Arua, so they lead him to the rope that Arua used to descend into the valley, but that rope snapped a while ago, so she probably fell to her doom. Kai leaps down into the valley and discovers Arua's body lying at the bottom. Miraculously, she's still alive, but the severe blood loss means time is running out. Remembering how his own wounds mysteriously healed when he first arrived here, Kai attempts to replicate the process using magic. He focuses on picturing her injuries healing themselves. As he concentrates, he can somehow perceive the very fabric of Arua's tissues, allowing him to target each damaged cell. Channeling his magic, he works to restore her wounded flesh. With this newfound understanding, Kai successfully closes Arua's wounds. Kai is genuinely surprised that actually worked. However, it seems Arua will need some time to recover before she can stand again. Meanwhile, Kai notices a disturbance at the valley's edge and realizes the orcs have launched an attack. The Korers are nearly helpless against the enormous orcs, leaving them with little they can do. But suddenly, Kai appears, saving them by driving his blade through one of the orcs' chests. While he was away, several Korers had already been slain, and the one responsible is the orc leader. The orc leader shows its divine crest, trying to frighten Kai, yet its cleaver remains drenched in the blood of the slaughter Korers. Because of this, Kai refuses to back down, not until he has his vengeance, and he isn't the only one filled with rage, as he hears a voice begins in his head, urging him to slaughter the orc and fill its heart with terror before its end. Kai understands the voice belongs to the valley god, and as the guardian bearer of the valley god, he stands ready to fulfill its command. However, before Kai can start the fight, Porek steps up and offers to join him. He might not be as strong as Kai, but as a guardian bearer himself, he's more than capable in battle. Kai is grateful for the backup. It'll make things much simpler, and to make sure the orcs understand exactly what they're facing, Kai turns toward them and activates his own divine crest. The smug looks on the orcs' faces vanish as the orcs realize that they're now up against two guardian bearers. Still, their leader orders them to attack anyways. The orcs rush forward, and Kai swiftly cuts down both of them. One tries to ambush Kai while he's distracted, but Porek dashes in and strikes it down to shield him. Kai nods in gratitude, though Porek admits he can only handle the weaker foes. With that, he tells Kai he'll have to face the orc guardian bearer alone. Kai grabs a cleaver and begins approaching the last orc. The orc, sensing its doom, attempts to plead for mercy. This one can speak the human tongue and tells Kai there's no need for conflict, as the orc only meant to target the Korers. It claims it had no intention of offending Kai. Under ordinary circumstances, Kai wouldn't be this furious. But the orcs didn't just slaughter numerous Korers, they committed this atrocity within Kai's own valley. Seeing the blue divine energy radiating from Kai's body, the orc begins pleading for his life. Yet Kai feels no pity for him. The orc launches a desperate attack in an attempt to survive, but Kai slices off its arm with his energy blade and drives the weapon through the orc's chest to extract its godstone. Watching this unfold, Porek becomes more convinced than ever that Kai truly is the arbitration god, the very same deity who once took his eyes, a god who has safeguarded the world since before the era of gods. For the first time, Kai has taken the life of a guardian bearer, and Porek reveals that consuming a guardian bearer's godstone allows one to acquire the abilities of the fallen guardian. Unlike an ordinary godstone, this one is far more powerful, meaning it should grant Kai a significant increase in strength. Kai splits the godstone into two pieces, yet before drinking his share, he offers part of it to Porek. Porek questions whether Kai is certain about giving him a portion, but Kai insists that Porek deserves it after aiding him in the battle against the orcs. After a moment, Porek accepts the gift and expresses his gratitude for Kai's kindness. After drinking the godstone, Porek immediately drops to his knees, caught off guard by the intense potency of the guardian bearer's power, far stronger than he expected. At first, Kai appears unaffected, but moments later, he collapses to the ground in pain. The Korers quickly gather around him, concerned, asking if he's okay. Kai reassures them, saying he just needs some time to recover, and then he makes his way back down to the valley, warning them to keep their distance for now. While Kai is resting, a nightmare from his childhood haunts his sleep. In this world, his first village was set ablaze by a band of guerrillas, leaving him no choice but to escape and find shelter in Lag Village. When morning comes, Kai wakes up and is surprised to see that he's been covered with a blanket. But what shocks him even more is discovering Aru lying next to him. He panics and demands to know what Aru is doing, so she tells tells him that she only wanted to keep him from catching a cold, which is why she stayed close to keep him warm. Although Kai saved her, she reminds him that she was still sent here as an offering, and because of that, she vows to dedicate her life to serving him as best as she can. Kai responds that he doesn't need a servant and urges her to go back home, but Aru insists she cannot. According to what his grandfather told her, if she fails to fulfill her duty as an offering, a terrible misfortune will fall upon all of them, so she can't leave. Kai continues trying to persuade her to return home, but then he notices the sun has risen, meaning he needs to hurry back to Lag Village before anyone discovers he was gone. He quickly scales the side of the valley, only to be surprised when he finds the rest of the Korras still waiting for him. He expected them to have left by now, but as Porek explains, while they're grateful Kai saved them from the orcs, they have nowhere else to go. With their old village destroyed, they were hoping Kai would allow them to stay here and dedicate themselves to serving him. Kai can't help but feel some sympathy for their situation, so he reluctantly agrees to let them settle on the land around the valley. But he makes one thing very clear: they're absolutely forbidden from entering the valley itself without his direct permission. Just as he's preparing to return to the village, Porek stops him, saying there's something crucial he needs to share before Kai leaves them. Not long after, Kai makes it back to the village, only to immediately face an irritated Jose. He's late for their usual morning training, and she isn't happy about it. When she demands to know where he's been, Kai can't exactly admit that he was in the valley, so he settles for the simple excuse of having overslept. A short time later, the chief comes up to a few of Kai's friends and asks if they have any idea where he might be. Monzo replies that Kai was given storage house duty today, so he should be somewhere near the castle. When Vezin finally tracks him down, he immediately challenges Kai to a duel. After hearing about Kai's impressive performance while defending Jose, Vezin is eager to witness Kai's strength firsthand, but he assures Kai that it's just a friendly sparring match, so there's no need to worry about anyone getting killed. Kai feels relieved knowing that this isn't a fight to the death, but after what Porek told him, he realizes he'll need to stay cautious. Porek advised him to keep the fact that he's a guardian bearer a secret for the time being. Since he only recently gained this power, he's vulnerable and could be easily targeted before he learns to control it fully. That's why Kai must make sure to keep his divine crest concealed no matter what. So Kai knows he has to restrain himself during the fight with Vezin. Even though Vezin is the weaker one, he's the first to attack, prompting Kai to leap aside and evade each incoming blow. However, as the battle heats up, Kai starts getting too fired up, causing his divine crest to appear. He quickly pulls himself together and manages to suppress it, making the crest disappear. But with the duel still underway, Kai pushes forward and lands a strike on Vezin with his spear. Unfortunately, Vezin's durability is so extreme that when Kai strikes him, the spear snaps in half, leaving Kai no choice but to fight empty-handed. To his credit, Kai refuses to back down, but this determination leads to him getting brutally kicked away. The impact knocks him out, leaving him gasping and unable to continue. Luckily for Kai, Vezin seems content with how the fight played out and doesn't press further. He reaches out a hand to help Kai back to his feet, and having taken a liking to him, he declares that starting tomorrow, he will personally take charge of Kai's training. Kai isn't exactly thrilled about the idea, but he knows he can't turn down an offer from the chief. Jose is impressed that Kai managed to hold his own so well against her father, but Alha doesn't share the same sentiment, still viewing Kai as nothing more than an ordinary commoner. Meanwhile, Jose is already caught up thinking about her next training together. Once Vezin heads off, Monzo and the rest of Kai's friends come by to check on him, and after making sure he's alright, they burst into laughter since he ended up training with Vezin. With both Jose and Vezin constantly pulling him in every direction, Kai hasn't had the chance to leave the village for quite some time, but tonight, he finally gets the chance to slip away. Kai makes his way back to the valley, feeling excited to return, but then he notices a house and immediately gets upset, thinking the Korras moved in even after he warned them the area was off limits. But when he goes to investigate, he finds out it was only Aru. Although Kai had forbidden the Korras from entering the valley, Aru had never actually left. On top of that, she had been getting ready for Kai's return, and even brings out a plate of food she prepared just for him. Kai was on the verge of telling her to leave, but then he catches sight of the food she prepared, and suddenly, he no longer has any objections to Aru staying in the valley. Aru inquires if he enjoys the meal she made, and Kai responds by saying it's delicious. However, beyond just the taste, this is the biggest portion he's ever had the chance to enjoy. He almost finds himself wishing he could remain here indefinitely, since the servings he gets back in the village are typically very small. The next day, Kai is surprised because when he heads to the buffet to collect his daily meal, he's handed a fairly generous portion. The woman explains that she's giving him extra because he's been putting in a lot of effort recently. Kai appreciates the additional food, but his friends grow envious and question why he's the only one receiving special treatment. In response, she points out that they've been slacking all day, so if they want bigger portions, they'll need to start working harder for it. Meanwhile, across the buffet, Elsa is busy serving other villagers, but she's so distracted staring at Kai that she ends up piling way too much food onto this guy's plate. Now, she has to try and talk him into giving the extra portion back. In the coming days, Kai persists with his nightly ritual of slipping out of the village to monitor the valley. While there, he chooses to assist Aru in constructing a house. However, completing it in a single day is impossible, so he begins by chopping a tree using his energy blade. The next morning, he returns to the village and spends the day training with Jose. Then that night, he goes back to the valley to continue building. He gets used to coming and going without anyone noticing him, and he really enjoys life in both villages. One day, Kai and his companions are assigned the task of relocating a massive boulder to clear room for new fields. Despite their collective efforts, they're unable to move it even slightly. Noticing their struggle, Vezin steps forward to lend a hand. For now, everyone clears a path for him, and Vezin grabs the boulder, moving it with all his might. Even for someone with Vezin's immense strength, a boulder of this size is no easy task. Yet, after a few moments of effort, he finally pries the massive rock free from the earth and even manages to raise it above his head. With the obstacle removed, the land is now clear for farming, and this new stretch of fertile soil means the village of Lag will thrive like never before. Seeing this, Vezin can't help but feel satisfied. Watching Vezin in that state inspires Kai to strive to become a great guardian bearer like him. So that night, while he's in the valley, Kai begins practicing with his powers and tries to make a flower bloom. But regardless of how much energy he channels into it, the flower refuses to react. Although Kai is physically strong now, there's still so much he has to learn before he can truly consider himself a rightful guardian bearer. The next morning, Kai returns to the village, and normally no one wakes up this early in the morning. But today, Kai runs into Elsa in the flower fields. He asks her why she's up so early, and she explains that she just wants to admire the flowers while they are in bloom. Kai never really noticed the flowers much before, but even he has to acknowledge how lovely they look. Elsa mentions that these blossoms remind her of the ones from their childhood village, the place where they both grew up. Kai seems puzzled by her comment, so Elsa continues, explaining how, even as their village burned, they still made an effort to save the flowers. It takes Kai a moment, but he soon recalls that Elsa was also from his original village. Elsa is upset that Kai failed to recognize her, given she was by his side when their village was destroyed. Kai comments that he was very young at the time, so many of his memories remain unclear. Kai might not have noticed Elsa, but she has certainly been observing him, and she finds it remarkable that he managed to gain Vezin's notice. Yet, Kai explains to her that he still has much to improve, as he considers himself weak compared to Vezin. He has a great deal to learn if he hopes to grow stronger, since that's the only path to his survival. Elsa recalls Kai saying those exact words on the day their village was engulfed in flames, but Kai's memory is still a little hazy, so she begins to recount what took place. As all the villagers were trying to flee, a gorilla suddenly ambushed them, and since none of them had any combat skills, they were basically helpless and on the verge of being massacred. But without hesitation, Kai charged straight at the gorilla and grabbed hold of its leg. Naturally, Kai was far too weak to inflict any real damage on the gorilla, but his courage gave Vezin just enough time to show up and save them. While Kai felt relieved that Vezin had rescued everyone, he also couldn't help but feel frustrated by how little he was able to contribute, so he made a vow to do whatever it took to become stronger. Then again, that oath might not hold much weight, considering he had forgotten all about it. Elsa shares with him that it holds deep meaning for her, as on that day, even if it didn't seem so, Kai rescued all the villagers. In her view, he will forever remain a true hero. Meanwhile, deep within the forest, a fierce battle is raging between the gorillas and the orcs, with the orc general completely overpowering the fight. Even the gorilla guardian bearers were no match for him, and were instantly decapitated. With that, the orcs declared victory over the gorillas, claiming this territory as their own, and now, their sights are set on Kai's valley. However, at this moment, Kai remains completely oblivious to the danger that approaches. The valley remains unchanged, so Kai returns to the village, and the following morning, he's assigned to storehouse duty. As he's working, he spots a grain of wheat on the floor and starts thinking whether he could use it to make rice balls, since he's been eager to try them. At that moment, Elsa approaches him, having overheard Kai mention rice balls, and she asks if he can describe what they are. Kai isn't entirely sure how to explain it, but he believes they're supposed to be incredibly delicious, even though he's never had one himself. Shortly after, Manso enters and scolds Kai, telling him to stop talking to Elsa and get back to work since there are still plenty of bags left to move. Kai quickly apologizes and resumes carrying the bags, while Vezin urges everyone to speed up and stash the food sacks in the basement before the inspector arrives. Alha walks up to Vezin and questions whether hiding the food from the inspector is truly needed, but Vezin explains that with the village's food supplies running low, failing to conceal some of it would mean smaller rations for the villagers. Alha doesn't seem bothered. After all, a bit of hunger never killed anyone, but Vezin genuinely cares for his people and refuses to let anyone go hungry under his leadership. Kai and his friends don't know the full story, but they've heard that an inspector from the Central Plains is on his way, and they need to stash away some of their food before he arrives and takes everything. They've also heard that this inspector is a guardian bearer, even stronger than Vezin, but unlike Vezin, he doesn't use his power for anything honorable. A few hours pass. The inspector shows up, prompting the gate to be opened as Vezin steps forward to greet him. The inspector's first reaction is to grumble about how many demi-humans are around, explaining that he was attacked by a group of gorillas on his way here. He claims there were about 10 of them, but he was able to fend them off by himself, so he's fine. Jose finds that impressive. After all, it takes real strength to handle 10 gorillas solo, but when she finally meets him, she's far less impressed. Gandil is just a pipsqueak, and his very first act is to belittle Jose, calling her a frail woman. He doesn't stop there, he also mocks Alha, accusing him of being incompetent for failing to eliminate the demi-humans in the region. Neither of them dares to argue back. Moments later, another man steps through the village gate, prompting Vezin to ask if he's with Gandal's party, but that isn't the case. The stranger introduces himself as Nada, explaining that he was dispatched by the monastery of Maz. He merely took the same route as Gandil, which is why they showed up at the same time. Gandil proceeds to examine the village storehouse, and his His expression darkens, there's barely any grain inside. As a tax collector, he takes immense satisfaction in squeezing every last bit from small villages. So he turns to Vezin and demands to know if this pitiful amount is truly all the grain the village has saved. Vezin insists that he would never even think of hiding any part of their harvest and assures Gandalf that what he sees is all they have. He offers an excuse, claiming that the weather's been bad lately.